Lindsey Buckingham has spent more than 5 decades in the music business, from his early days in California to the top of the rock and roll world with one of the most successful bands in history. At 76 years old, he has weathered creative battles, professional fallouts, and the kind of personal turbulence that comes with a lifetime in the spotlight. But on the morning of April 1st, 2026, he faced something far more immediate and unsettling than anything the music industry ever threw at him. And the question on the minds of law enforcement and fans alike is a simple but troubling one. How did this happen, and how close did it actually come to being much worse? The incident took place in Santa Monica, California, when Buckingham arrived at a building for a scheduled appointment. A woman was waiting for him. Authorities describe her as a stalking suspect, someone known to Buckingham from prior incidents stretching back over time. When Buckingham entered the building, the woman threw an unknown substance at him and then fled the scene. Buckingham was not physically injured. Police were notified, and by Wednesday afternoon, law enforcement sources told NBC television that the suspect had been identified, though no arrest had been made at that point. Investigators expressed confidence that an arrest was expected soon. But here is where the details start to raise serious questions. How did this woman know exactly where Buckingham was going to be, and when? That is precisely what investigators are working to determine. Authorities have stated they believe the suspect learned both the location and the timing of Buckingham's appointment before showing up at the building. The Santa Monica Police Department and the Los Angeles Police Department are handling the case jointly, with the LAPD's Threat Management Unit involved in the investigation. That unit specializes in cases involving stalking, threats against public figures, and situations where a person's safety is considered to be at ongoing risk. The involvement of that unit signals that law enforcement is treating this as more than an isolated incident. It suggests a pattern and a threat level that goes beyond a single confrontation. Understanding who Lindsey Buckingham is helps put the gravity of this moment in proper context. He was born in Palo Alto, California, and came of age during the musical explosion of the 1960s and 70s. He joined Fleetwood Mac in 1975 alongside his then-girlfriend Stevie Nicks, and the pairing transformed the band. Within 2 years, Fleetwood Mac released an album called Rumors that went on to become one of the best-selling records in history. It spent 31 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard charts and has sold an estimated 40 million copies worldwide. Buckingham won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year for that record, one of 2 Grammys he would earn with the band. The songs he wrote and performed became part of the American soundtrack. Go Your Own Way, Tusk, Big Love, The Chain. These are not just hits. They are cultural touchstones for an entire generation of listeners. So when a man of that stature is targeted in a public setting, it resonates beyond the celebrity news cycle. It raises a broader question that has been growing louder for years. Are public figures, even those who are not actively touring or promoting, adequately protected from people who become fixated on them? The answer, based on a growing body of incidents, is complicated. And Buckingham's situation is not without history. Court records reveal that Buckingham previously sought and obtained a restraining order against a woman named Michelle Dick. The allegations in that case were serious and detailed. Dick was accused of years of stalking behavior targeting Buckingham and his family. According to the records, the conduct included loitering near his homes, leaving repeated threatening voicemails, and in one particularly alarming episode, fabricating a 911 report of gunfire at his residence. That false report triggered a police raid on his home. The psychological toll of that kind of harassment, directed not just at Buckingham but at his family, is difficult to overstate. Law enforcement sources in the current case have not confirmed whether the woman involved in the April 1st incident is the same individual, but the pattern of behavior described bears a troubling resemblance to what was documented in those earlier court filings. Which raises yet another question that investigators are now confronting. If this is the same person, how was she in a position to approach Buckingham again? Restraining orders, as anyone familiar with stalking cases knows, are legal instruments. They carry real consequences when violated, but they do not physically prevent a determined individual from approaching their target. The effectiveness of such orders depends heavily on enforcement, on the stalker's willingness to comply, and on the target's ability to maintain a level of security that a private citizen, even a famous one, often cannot sustain indefinitely. Law enforcement professionals who work in threat assessment will tell you that a substantial percentage of stalking victims are targeted by someone they already know, someone who has already been documented, and someone who has already given clear warning signs of escalating behavior. The April 1st incident fits that profile in several respects. The substance that was thrown at Buckingham has not been publicly identified. Investigators have not disclosed what it was, whether it posed any health risk, or whether forensic analysis has been completed. That detail matters, because the nature of the substance could affect how the charges are ultimately filed. Throwing a liquid or powder at someone without their consent can range in legal severity depending on the material involved. If the substance is found to be benign, charges may center on stalking and assault. If it is determined to be hazardous in any way, the charge profile changes significantly. Prosecutors and investigators will be weighing those factors carefully as they move toward an arrest. Buckingham's professional life in recent years has had its own share of turbulence, separate entirely from this incident. His departure from Fleetwood Mac in 2018 was not a quiet exit. The split involved Stevie Nicks, with whom Buckingham had a decades-long personal and professional relationship that shaped much of the band's identity and creative tension. Reports at the time indicated that Nicks had issued an ultimatum to band management, and Buckingham was ultimately let go. He later gave interviews in which he described being blindsided by the decision. The fallout was public and, by many accounts, painful for everyone involved. After leaving the band, he underwent open-heart surgery in 2019, a procedure that reportedly affected his vocal cords and required significant recovery. Despite those challenges, Buckingham continued to work and perform, demonstrating the kind of resilience that has defined his career. In 2021, he and his wife filed a lawsuit against the band over his dismissal, which was ultimately settled. He released a solo album and remained active in music on his own terms. In 2017, before the split, he had collaborated with fellow Fleetwood Mac member Christine McVie on a joint album. McVie passed away in 2022, and her death marked the end of an era for the band's original lineup. Buckingham spoke publicly about her passing with evident grief. His career, in other words, has not been static. He remains a working musician and a public figure, which means his schedule, his movements, and his whereabouts are not entirely private matters. That visibility is precisely what makes the security challenge so difficult. A musician who still performs, still does interviews, still attends appointments like any other person navigating daily life, cannot seal themselves off from the world entirely. And yet, as this case illustrates, even a routine appointment on an ordinary Wednesday morning can become a moment of real danger when someone has been tracking your movements and has decided to act. Law enforcement in Los Angeles has extensive experience with celebrity stalking cases. The LAP Threat Management Unit was established in part because of high-profile incidents in the 1980s and 90s that exposed how vulnerable public figures could be to obsessive individuals. Over the decades, that unit has handled thousands of cases involving actors, musicians, athletes, and other well-known individuals. The unit's involvement in Buckingham's case reflects the seriousness with which investigators are approaching the situation, and it suggests that the investigation is not being treated as a routine matter. As of the time this report was prepared, no arrest had been publicly confirmed, no charges had been formally filed, and the substance thrown at Buckingham had not been publicly identified. His representative had been contacted by NBC but had not yet issued a public statement. The investigation was described as active and ongoing, with authorities working to piece together how the suspect obtained information about his appointment, whether anyone assisted her in obtaining that information, and what her precise intentions were when she entered that building on April 1st. For Lindsey Buckingham, the immediate outcome was fortunate. He was not hurt. He walked away from the encounter physically unharmed. But the incident is a reminder that fame, even decades removed from its peak, does not come without costs. And for the investigators now working this case, the central task is making sure that the next time, if there is one, does not end differently.